The global pandemic has changed our world as we know it. It's been particularly devastating on the aviation sector. Airports have been shut, thousands of airplanes grounded, businesses have ceased operations, and the long-term financial costs may not be known for years to come. But according to the International Air Transport Association, this year's loss of revenue has cost airlines more than $300 billion. Thousands in the air travel industry have been left jobless. Qatar Airways, one of the world's biggest carriers, is no exception. The Doha-based airline was already dealing with restrictions imposed by 4 Arab nations as part of their blockade of Qatar. Without access to the airspace of its neighbors, it had to find new routes and new destinations. And now, as it navigates the turbulent skies in the wake of the pandemic, how will the airline recover from both the health and political crises? And what's in store for the future of global air travel after the pandemic? The Chief Executive Officer of Qatar Airways, Akbar Al-Bakr, talks to Al Jazeera. Akbar Al-Bakr, Chief Executive Officer of Qatar Airways Group, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. What are the measures that Qatar Airways is taking to ensure the safety of passengers flying in the future in light of the pandemic?
Every measure that is required by the WHO and the Ministry of Public Health in my country has been complied with. As a matter of fact, we have even gone over and above what is required. We have social distancing, we have people with masks, gloves, sanitizers. Actually, we even at the airport started way ahead when the pandemic just started in China, that we started to use temperature readers for everybody. We even have introduced a robot that does UV sanitization in the entire building of Hamad International Airport, something that no other airport had introduced. What is important to note is that passenger safety and the safety of our employees, and of course, my country in general, is always paramount in our mind.
What will the future of air travel look like for passengers coming into Qatar? Will they be tested upon arrival? Will they be tested before they board? What are the processes that you're thinking about putting into effect?
First and foremost, let me to tell you that air travel, as far as transmission of the COVID-19, is the least of the worry should be to the people. However, when people arrive at Hamad International wanting to enter my country, they will have to go through a protocol required by our Ministry of Public Health, that they will be tested. They'll have to wait for the test to come, and then they will be put into quarantine for 14 days. This is a practice not only unique to Qatar. Now it has been introduced in many other countries in the world, in UK, in France, in Germany, in Switzerland, Singapore, Bangkok, India, everywhere. This is the protocol that you need to follow. So we are following exactly what we feel is important to save the general population of our country from this infection.
When will the expats be allowed back into Qatar?
I think as far as I am concerned, I think it will happen soon. I cannot give a date because I'm not the authority that allows people to come in or not to come in due to this very serious pandemic, which we have never faced for the last 110 years. I think it will happen soon, but this entry protocol will have to be followed.
If you're being tested, why would you need to quarantine another 14 days?
Because you could be negative today, but the virus is still not showing because it is not yet active. So you could be positive the next day after you enter the country. This is why, to be on the safe side, you are required to quarantine for 14 days.
What about, you mentioned social distancing measures when you're flying. What does that mean in terms of passengers on a plane?
First and foremost, let me to tell you that the safest way to travel, social distancing in premium cabin, is in Qatar Airways. As far as the economic class is concerned, social distancing will really not be possible in an aeroplane. And if, like a lot of regulators are trying to impose it on a commercial flight, it will be a huge dent on the operating costs of our airline. For example, if I start social distancing by keeping one seat empty between passengers, I will only be carrying 50% of the load factor. If I do even more aggressive, like some countries may require us to do, that even keep one row empty behind a passenger, which means I will only carry 30% of the capacity of the airplane, which means that then I will have to put up the ticket price by over 300% to cover the cost of my operations. So it is very difficult to achieve this. You will be given a mask, gloves, sanitizers. At the same time, we will also give you a face shield. So you will be completely protected traveling on Qatar Airways. What is important to note, that with all these precautions that we are going to take, we also have introduced very minimum crew interaction with our passengers. And needless to say, we are one of the foremost airlines to let our crew to fly with full PPE, though it is a little bit uncomfortable to them, but it is also to protect my crew. And each aircraft is equipped with HEPA filters, which filters viruses and bacteria, and it circulates very often the entire air in the cabin. So in every way, I still think that air travel is the safest mode of travel in this pandemic. As long as there is no treatment, antibiotics, or a vaccine, I think this rule will keep on being imposed on passengers.
I want to talk about the financial ramifications of the pandemic on your industry.
Huge. It is huge. You can already see that there is a lot of airlines that have folded. A lot of airlines have asked for state aid. They have asked for subsidies. Exactly airlines that were accusing us, which our government was putting equity into the airline, now they are asking for subsidy. To them, this is a subsidy because they are privately owned airlines asking the government for bailout. So you can see there will be a lot of reduction in capacity. There will be a lot of bankruptcies. There will be a lot of job losses. There will be a lot of pain to our industry for the foreseeable future. We are trying to make the pain very little for the thousands of young men and women that have dedicated themselves to making Qatar what it is today, Qatar Airways, I mean. And it is my duty to make the pain as little as possible, but I'm not doing anything other than what many airlines have already done arbitrarily. We have sustained up to now, looking after all my staff, making sure that they are well looked after, that they are provided for. We have not done like other airlines have done. But eventually, to save my company and the other thousands, I have to take a little bit of pain. But we will try to reduce that pain as much as possible, but we will do better than what other airlines have done.
One of your biggest competitors in the Middle East, Emirates Airlines, has just said recently that it will take them at least 3 years to go back to their regular flight schedules, to flying to all the destinations they were. Qatar Airways was flying to over 170 destinations before the pandemic hit, and it is now roughly around 50. How long before you anticipate you will get back to flying to most of the destinations you were flying to before?
Nobody can say the future, what it will happen. I know that travel is today part of our DNA. So we will travel. People will start traveling as soon as there is a vaccine or a treatment. Yes, it will take longer to get back to the 2019 traffic growth that we were really looking at huge growth in our both network and passenger numbers. I think that it may take 2 years, it may take 4 years, but we will get back. And we will be back to the size we were in 2019 by the will of God. What I need to warn people that the industry will not be the same. Because, like in 2008, when we had the financial collapse, all the companies stopped their executives traveling first class. After this pandemic and the usefulness of doing conference calls, video calls, working from home, this will reduce business traffic, which is really the bread and butter of our industry. I hope that the impact will not be as bad as I expect. One thing I can tell you, you will pay more to travel.
How much more?
Depends of how well the recovery is and how much more passengers we can fit in the front of the airplane. This all depends of what the regulations allow me to put on my airplane. Like I said in the early part of the interview, if there are social distancing, depends of how the social distancing is regulated, that will be the rate of increase in FS.
Let's move on to June of 2017, 3 years ago. Your neighbors imposed a blockade on Qatar. How did that change Qatar Airways operations?
If you look really what happened from 2017 until now, we grow by nearly 40% in fleet size. We also grew nearly that number with destinations. We lost 18 destinations, and in the first 18 months, we added 24 destinations, and then we kept on growing. The only thing that has slowed us down is the pandemic. We recovered, and I said this many times, and I don't want to keep on repeating something that I have said. It made my country more independent and strong. But when you look at, in hindsight, what did they achieve? What benefit they got? In what corner they have all put themselves in? This is a question I think you should put to them. What did they achieve? A very simple question. I'm sure the answer will be that they didn't achieve anything. We are still recognized all over the world as a country from whom people should learn of how to get out of this massive blockade. Like I had previously said, never happened since the Second World War.
If you had one thing to say to your neighbors at this point, 3 years later, what would it be?
Just come and apologize to our country and get back to business as normal, because they are not going to be able to hurt two things: our will to progress and to take away our sovereignty and our love to our ruler.
I want to talk about the cargo that you kept going throughout the pandemic. And there was a number of flights that were chartered to take citizens home around the world. Can you take us through why Qatar Airways decided to take on that role, to take people home during such a very difficult time? Because you put not only your staff, your crew at risk as well, but there was a lot of uncertainty about the disease itself and a lot of unknowns. But you still decided to go ahead and carry on flying. Why did you make that decision? You
always stand with your friends and your passengers and your guests at time of difficulties, when they are under stress. This pandemic brought unprecedented stress on my passengers and our friends. So it was the duty of Qatar Airways to be with people when we are at good times, same way we have to be with people at bad times. Everybody pulled the carpet from under their passengers who were booked with them. So it was our duty, as we were requested by our friendly countries, to help them to get their passengers home safely. And this is exactly what we did. But I'm very proud to say that over the last 3 months, Qatar Airways is the largest international airline operating with the highest number of ASK, which is available seat kilometers. We have traveled in this short period more than 50 million miles. We have carried more than 60,000 people back home. We have carried 1.8 million passengers over the last 3 months to their destinations. We have carried 175,000 medical equipment and medical supplies to countries, which is really equivalent to 1,750 cargo flights, only medical equipment. And we have operated hundreds of cargo flights supplying the world with necessities: food, medicine, general cargo, fulfilling the supply chain of many industries. So Qatar Airways didn't. We always find a way to do business. We will always try to find ways to keep our airplanes flying. But let me tell you that we are the only airline in the world that recognized, appreciated, and rewarded the medical profession by our 100,000 tickets that we distributed to all the countries in the world, including countries, medical staff of countries who are adversaries to us. So what we try to prove to the world, that Qatar doesn't divide people but brings people together.
Why did you decide to do that, the campaign that you launched?
To appreciate the medical profession who have put themselves in the way of harm, not knowing what this virus is going to do, because in the beginning nobody knew. There is more understanding about it now. But when it really happened, medical staff didn't know. And you can see how many medical staff died and how many medical staff were affected in all the countries. So they really put themselves in the way of danger selflessly, without looking after their interest, looking at the interest of the people. So it was something small that the state of Qatar, Qatar Airways is part of Qatar Inc. We had to appreciate them in a very generous manner.
Can you talk to me about the airport, Hamad International Airport? What will traveling through that airport be like in the future? What will the experience be like? Because I imagine it'll be different.
We are one of the best airports in the world. We are the best airport by far in the region. And we will make sure that passengers will always have that fantastic experience when they pass through Hamad International Airport. Hamad Airport really is a destination in itself. Once we do the expansion, which should be ready in just 2 years' time, you will see that we will take the mode of travel, the travel experience, to an even higher level. For people who would want to come to Hamad International as their most important and most preferred gateway. And the benefit of this is because an airline is operating the airport, so we know exactly what you like and what you would expect from an airline that is world's 5-star airline.
The price of tickets on Qatar Airways has always been on the more expensive side. And you're saying now that it will increase as a result of this pandemic. Do you think that means your revenues will reduce because it will limit the accessibility to the number of people that can afford to fly with Qatar Airways?
Exactly, this is why we will have to put up our ticket prices, because we will be carrying less people in an aeroplane, not because we cannot carry more people, but because the regulations are imposing on us to carry less passengers, so I have to increase the price. And also, when you go to lease a car, it's your choice. You want to lease a third-class car, or you want to lease a first-class car. So when you want to lease a first-class car, you have to pay more for traveling on that first-class car.
Your financial portfolio has been quite impressive, especially since the blockade as well. There's been a $4.8 billion in revenue in 2019. You were also looking at stake in Africa's Rwanda Air, as well as the IAG group. In February, you increased your stake in that by 20 to 25%, and they reported a loss of over $500 million. Will that all change now, your diversification of your financial investments?
First of all, the figure you just gave of 4.8 billion revenue is wrong. I don't know from where you got this figure because we have not yet announced our revenue figures. We will be doing it once our accounts are audited.
Do you have a rough estimate?
I cannot give it to you because the effect of the pandemic came into the first 3 months of this year, and our financial year is from 1st of April to 31st of March. So, of course, we will announce. We are very transparent in Qatar. So we will announce our results when we have finished our audit. The second thing I want to inform you is about our investment. So how the airline operates is a separate to how our investments will be deployed. We are, with our investments for long term, we have invested in these 3 major airlines for strategic reason. And we will continue to assist them if they require our assistance. LATAM has filed for Chapter 11, and as the court will decide, we will be there to support the company. As far as IAG is concerned, we will also be there to support them. They will be asking for, if they ask for any assistance from the European governments, is a separate story, but as a shareholder, we will be there with them, and so will be with any other investments Qatar Airways has.
When do you think you're at a position now to forego any government assistance?
Up to now, we have not asked for any government assistance because we are still using our reserves, and we are using our financing that we had already put in place, the credit lines we have with our bankers. But if this continues for a longer period, then we would go to our owner for an equity injection. We are not asking for subsidy or aid. We are asking for equity because we are a government-owned airline.
As well as being the CEO of Qatar Airways Group, you're also the Secretary General of Qatar's National Tourism Council. Can you speak to us about what are your plans about increasing tourism into the country?
We have a lot of very interesting plans. We have a lot of developments that will take place in the tourism field. We will raise the quality and standards of tourism facilities in the country. But how I'm going to do it and how I'm going to attract these tourists, I'm not prepared to talk about it because I always mention that a successful general does not lay the army's battle plans to everybody.
So you believe it is going to be a battle?
Well, you know that everybody in this region want to develop tourism. We want to differentiate ourselves differently. We don't want the kind of tourism that some other people target. We want to put our tourism in a completely different league, and that is my job.
Akbar Al-Bakr, Chief Executive Officer of Qatar Airways Group, thank you so much for talking to Al Jazeera.
It's my pleasure.